Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm Vahe, the founder of Strategy Publishing, and we're here today on our WordPress week, WordPress Publisher Success Week. This is the second out of the four daily events sessions. Yesterday, as I was alluding to, we covered the state of WordPress. Today, we're going to be talking about automation and AI. And today, it's a panel discussion. Having with me is Liam Andrew, the CPO of the Texas Tribune, and Pete Pachal, the founder of Media Copilot, and a former journalist who has extensive experience in the space covering AI as well. So, Liam, Pete, hi, how are you?
Hey, good stuff. Feeling great.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. And just a quick note of thanks to our sponsors, Multidots. Multidots, a leading enterprise WordPress agency, helping one of the leading publishers around the world with WordPress solutions, whether it's migration, web development, and general, improvement of site performance. So, with that, let's just for our audience, we're going to be just sort of going through introductions. We'll break up the state of play, and then we'll go jump into the core topic of a lot of the things that we spoke about as well prior to our call. So let's start with the introductions. Liam, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I'm Liam Andrew. I'm Chief Product Officer at the Texas Tribune. So I'll start with myself and talk for a second about the Tribune too. I've been at the Tribune for about 8 years. I started as a software engineer here, and before that I had a background in AI and machine learning as well. So this is not new to me, but generative AI is new to me and just about everybody. So it's been a fun learning experience in the last couple of years. The Texas Tribune is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, all-digital newsroom. We were founded in 2009. And I like to say we're not local, we're regional, we're really quite big. We have there are 30 million people in Texas. If it were a country, it would have the 8th largest economy in the world. So we're doing a big job with as big a newsroom as we can muster. So it's been a fun and exciting challenge to do this, especially as automation and AI are going to help us try to really scale up all of the problems that we want to be able to cover in Texas.
Awesome. And Liam, yeah, there's a lot of unique insights on the product level. On some of the things that you're looking at as part of the service journalism that we'll cover today as well. But Pete, thank you, Liam. Pete, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Pete Pachal. I've been a tech journalist for quite a long time, a couple decades. I spent most of the 2010s at Mashable doing all sorts of formats, media strategy, and just trying out everything under the sun, working closely with product teams. Since then, I've had some strategic roles at various publications, most recently at CoinDesk, where I was the chief of staff there for about 3.5 years. And one of the most interesting and pleasing projects I got to work on there was the publication's approach to generative AI. Last year, we developed some guidelines, and I polished them and published them on the site. And we ended up prototyping a bunch of use cases. And after I left CoinDesk, I decided I really liked doing that. So I founded the Media Copilot, which is my newsletter, Substack, also a consultancy. We do AI training for journalists, media, and marketers. And it's been a nonstop, breakneck pace of learning ever since I founded it back in October. And happy to say the newsletter's been very successful. I get approached all the time about people wanting to learn more about AI. And I think the course that we give in it has changed about a half dozen times since we started offering it a few months ago. So it lets you know how quickly the pace is on innovation in this space. But I'm super excited to be here. Hope you'll check out the newsletter.
Yeah, just I just want to also flag as well that it's not a small, like in a short period of time, already amassed 16,000 newsletter subscribers. So definitely on the pulse on everything, and we're lucky to and happy to have you as well on the panel and also as a media partner. So thank you so much for that. Okay, let's jump into the core.
Oh, I think we lost him.
No.
Well, hey, you there? Usually you lose just the sound. It's like I feel like he was just beamed out of here.
Right, we jumped into something.
Yeah. Well, Liam, do you want to kick us off about maybe some things that the Texas Tribune is doing, and maybe even started where, you know, the bomb that dropped that was ChatGPT and how things have changed since then?
Yeah, we can start there. Absolutely. Right, like I said, we're not strangers to AI at the Tribune, at least pre-generative AI. We were doing work on content recirculation modules, kind of working with the Brown Institute's local news lab there, and thinking about how filtering models, work like that. I think when ChatGPT came out, you know, the first, like everybody, our first thought was, well, this is quite something. But you know, I think the first thing people rightly had concerns about was privacy, and just being, you know, asking any question or putting any of our work in there was going to get reused or spit back out in ways that we weren't comfortable with. So so I'd say we were, you know, the first stage was just hesitation or just wondering what we're going to do with it. But we, you know, since then, I think we've really honed in on a few specific ideas or just inspirations, and we've also gained some momentum with some funding that we received from the Rockefeller Foundation to really dedicated to AI experimentation. And so the first thing we did, and partly because of the concerns around privacy and the concerns, of course, that journalists have about, reporters in particular have about what this means for their work and their livelihoods, we published an ethics policy, and that you can find that on our website. And that's just the foundation. It kind of lays the groundwork for what we will and won't try to do with AI. And I think that's been a really good level set internally for the organization, and it's something we can point to for our sponsors, funders, for our general public, for our audience who want to know, make sure that we're doing the right things with AI. And I think as a mission-driven organization, we do get a lot of questions from our members too, small-time donors and big donors, about you know, making sure we're not causing harm to journalism with the work that we're trying to do with it. So that's been a big part. And we're, you know, now moving now that we have that fully developed, although it's always, you know, under review. I think it's something we'll keep reviewing, you know, all the time. But we are now kind of really moving forward on a couple of trenches of research and experimentation and building that we're in some buying as well that we're pretty excited about.
Nice. Like you mentioned sort of things you will and won't do with AI. I imagine like one of the first things a lot of publications sort of consider, certainly, and some even tried to do, is doing content, right? Like it's the first thing you think of. AI can write stuff. So maybe you can write articles. And I don't know how far you guys went down that path, but it seems that that's, I wouldn't say necessarily a no-no, but it's like, it's kind of like getting, trying to drive like crazy, you know, NASCAR type stuff with an old beater, like a VW Beetle or something, right? It's like AI is not really equipped to do that. It can sort of do it, but you need to do a lot of different things around that particular application to get anything out of that. So given that, well, I should maybe, since I'm a panelist, maybe I should talk a little bit about our experience with that. So like at CoinDesk, we sort of like probably went down that path. I think most publications did, in terms of like, let's see if this can actually write articles, because, you know, traffic hasn't actually been great for media the last couple of years. And you see this tool and you think, well, maybe we could do content at scale with it, or some version of scale, right? And you quickly run into the limitations very quickly. Like particularly with something like CoinDesk, not only did you get the problem with hallucinations and the problem that everyone sees with sort of very generic kind of content generally, especially if you're coming out of like ChatGPT specifically, but you also have the problem of, this is highly specialized area, like crypto and digital assets. That was there's a lot of specialized knowledge that you need just to kind of like be passable. And then if you're going to write something actually worthwhile within that field, something substantive, that sort of narrows your abilities even more. And that's kind of why like crypto journalists are really sort of sought after. That knowledge is hard to come by. And you can simulate some of that with an AI. I think AI is getting quite good at this in terms of taking like special data sets and mining stuff out of them. But in terms of like the nuance and the putting it together, I mean, you kind of can't really do it, at least in terms of a finished article sense. So we sort of abandoned that pretty quickly. But we did look at like a bunch of other use cases, certainly, and one being copy editing, another being sort of to the extent it can adapt existing content and possibly reformat it. So one of the most promising things we looked at was actually looking at the interviews that our CoinDesk TV team was doing, and then using AI to assist in writing articles, not a transcript, but an actual article that would sort of extract the substance of the article and give you at least a first draft of that. That was actually quite good, because in terms of like the time it would take to go from pure interview or pure transcript to an article format, I mean, it probably cut it at least in half. So those are kind of the sort of promising use cases, at least in initially. And I feel like beyond that, like in terms of content generation, that's sort of what we looked at in terms of content generation. But there's also like obvious stuff, right? Like doing social media copy, suggesting headlines, even story ideas, and research with documents. So there's a lot of legal cases that CoinDesk would look at, and having an AI be able to read the document and extract summaries and stuff like that, that's very powerful. So I think the main takeaway is like, don't go right to the obvious thing. Like, is this going to write for me? We can go into that a little more, because I do think you shouldn't ignore that use case entirely. I think you just need to really understand this is like earlier than first draft even stuff you're getting, and there needs to be like human in the loop and a lot of putting. I think actually a publication that's doing this well is Semaphore, right? I think the thing they're doing now is Semaphore Signals, and if you're unfamiliar, it's essentially an AI tool where they look out on the web in multiple languages around a topic, and the AI will automatically summarize stories and goings on, I guess, from multiple stories to a reporter, who then takes that and puts it together, cleans it up, and adds their own insights. That's actually not bad. And that's, I think, to me, what the future of what you might call reblogging looks like, or aggregation more generally, which has become certainly a cheaper and was never really that well respected part of journalism. I think that's mostly going to be taken over by AI and use cases like Semaphore Signals.
Yeah, we're actually seeing already some 100% bots repurposing our content. I mean, we've been seeing that for a long time, but it's just happening more and more. That's proliferating quickly. I certainly think the way that Semaphore is handling it, with certainly a human editor who links back to sources, like that's the way to go, and certainly a solid use case for it. I think the 4 jobs that I divided AI value into, the 4 jobs it does, or potential that it can do, is like summarizing, analyzing, recommending, and transcribing. They're all related, and you can argue with those 4 verbs, but I think summarizing, that's a huge one, and something that we're also piloting at the Texas Tribune for our events. We do about 50 public events every year, and we want to give that insight. We want to give that to a digital audience as well, make sure that they can see and understand, and don't have to necessarily watch the whole hour if they just want a summary. So that's a place that we're experimenting as well. Not just for interviews one-on-one, but also being able to, our full panels with elected officials, for instance, and allowing you not only to get a quick and easy transcripts for it, but also to get quick summaries of it.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really a good context to look at the current use cases so far. I want to quickly just touch on the ethical consideration side, because I want to just touch on that a little bit so we can move on to more of the applications that, I mean, you guys are both seeing as well, working on ethical considerations in terms of LLMs, and even boundaries of the use cases. Maybe Pete, if I can start with you. So I know that you guys recently covered, Google Gemini, and there's also been the fact that Google has made the partnership with Reddit in feeding a lot of the discussion content into their language models. Where do you sort of, is there in terms of improving, and where do you see the ethical considerations lie from there?
Man, ethical considerations on AI, that's either a sphere that's never fully lit, or a polyhedron that I just honestly don't know where to start half the time. But let's start with, you mentioned Gemini. So obviously everyone in the world has probably at this point heard about the pile that Google stepped in with its attempt to correct for what it perceived to be biased in its training data, particularly around diversity, right? So there's all this images that came out last week. I'm sure you all saw. I'm not sure I need to recap it, but you know, these very historically inaccurate images were created when it was really just trying to sort of give a more diverse picture. Which again, I mean, you could argue for and against that kind of correction overall. I mean, I think there's a case to be made either way. But I think it lays bare the whole idea of bias in not just the training set, but also like how they're programming the training set. And I think it's a very important reminder that humans are authoring these systems and humans are flawed beings and they're going to get stuff wrong. And we're also very early into AI, right? And, you know, there's going to be more clumsy stuff like this. Again, that might be an indicator that down the road, they're going to get more subtle about, you know, what you might perceive as nefarious bias. That's possible. But I think the sheer, the sheer proliferation of AI models, I think, is going to serve as a bit of a preventative measure there. There's always something else you can turn to give you output that may or may not, they might be a little less censored, so to speak. So that's number one. I think there's the sort of, I think, more immediate and more practical ethical consideration on a lot of the use of AI is, what is this going to do to the overall enterprise of content, and what is it going to mean for both the economic and labor ecosystems that surround it? And then the most prevalent one that comes to mind is for imagery, particularly stock imagery. So I'll confess, this might be I'm in a small shop, so it's not like we have a lot of money for Getty contracts, but we basically use generative imagery almost exclusively at the Media Copilot. Now, part of that's just sort of a brand signature thing. We're covering AI. We're going to use AI for images, but part of it's pragmatic. It's like, I can quickly, with a prompt, get something that can visualize an abstract concept, which has always been a challenge in media. If you write about, say, financial markets and you need a thumbnail image for your story, there's only so many times you can do some, jazzed up graph or something that's going to work. You kind of, this is a continual need in many areas of media. I need some kind of image that illustrates this abstract concept. So you generally return to some stock imagery for it. Well, now with a $20 subscription to ChatGPT, you can get DALL-E to call up something for you every single time. That's probably closer than a lot of the stock imagery and faster. I'm sure we've all spent like way too much time searching for the perfect stock image for your particular story, time and again. Now, it's wondrous, it's great, but the thing is, well, this has all been trained. These diffusion models that create these images have been trained on the stock imagery, and the legalities of that are going to be settled at some point. But like, this body of work created it, and now this transformative derivative of that work looks to almost replace that entire industry and basically disincentivize people from creating it in the first place. And you take that, and to some extent now I've just defended, or not really defended, but like pointed out the flaws of this with text and articles in journalism. You can't really do it yet. We still need journalists to do anything in depth or analytical. That's very clear right now. But very much the same sort of logic holds for at least some areas of text generation too. So this is sort of the biggest issue. And I think I certainly see much more confidence in the media organizations I talk to about having rules against generative imagery than generative text. In other words, the blanket rules is what I'm talking about here. With generative text, there's like we need rules around it, but this is interesting. We can do stuff. For imagery, it's really terrifying for organizations, particularly any that has any kind of robust photography or image department, because we really if I'm looking at it just as a user, why would I ever use stock imagery again? And Liam, I kind of want you to tell me, as the representative here of an organization, how do you guys balance this ethical question of cheapening the entire enterprise of a particular part of content generation?
Yeah, that's very hard and fast rule for us in our AI ethics, and is that we will not create images with AI. If there were an AI generated image that was used we needed to embed as a source material, for instance, in a story, then we would watermark it and say this is AI generated. We certainly have a great photo team, and a lot of that, and we also employ a lot of contractors, and they will go out and take stock photos for us. So if we need a picture of the Texas Capitol, well, that's 2 blocks away. But if we need a picture of of City Hall in Dallas, we will have somebody go and get it. So I think that's just partly because we believe that there's going to be an increase of misinformation, whether done on purpose or just accidentally sort of released and percolated. And we feel pretty strongly that there's no excuse for us as a news organization to be generating pixels from scratch, even images from scratch. I think that's.
I think on top of that, Liam, what I was also wondering was like, who actually owns the responsibility of overseeing or managing the adoption of that? Because we spoke about on our pre-call about an example that maybe I'd like you to share about how sort of because ChatGPT is accessible, anyone can sort of use it if they have a subscription. Like maybe you can share that example of the image creation during the workflow and what happened, and I guess from there maybe advise media organizations on who can own the responsibility of managing that.
On the responsibility of managing image generation tools?
I'm sorry, just the use of AI, for example, within the workflow process.
Sure. Yeah, I think there are opportunities to use AI in the workflow. We've had a few ourselves. I think some of our reporters are using it as a bit of an advanced Google search, essentially. If they're finding source documents that they didn't find or would have been 10 pages deep in a Google search, and they're able to ask follow-up questions to ChatGPT to really get to a question. For instance, a document about water usage in 2005 that they really need. So that's a great source. It can be, and it's only getting better. The other way that we've been experimenting with and sometimes using AI has been as a summarizer, or as a way to kind of generate a first draft, or begin the writing process. And I think there's a few possible ways we can go about that, but primarily we're using that for service journalism right now. So it's for stories about the voting process, for instance, or stories about what if you have a question, for instance, about where to send your kid to school. I think those are where I think we're seeing a lot of potential for not just our reporters asking questions and getting good answers to sort of start a piece, or get more efficient with the writing process, but also potentially at some point to show to end users to ask and then to have them be able to ask questions. That of course opens a can of worms that we've seen for a few things. There's the Pizza Hut bot that was people started asking, should I marry my girlfriend? It's like, no, my job is pizza. We don't want to get down too far down that down that rabbit hole. But I think there's we're getting closer to that. We're actually deploying internally a chatbot that is trained on the Texas Tribune's archives, so that a fellow who comes in, for instance, or a junior reporter can quickly get up to speed on what's in the Tribune's archives, ask when was the last time somebody was quoted in our stories, what have they said about this issue, things like that. So it is certainly a valuable research tool and potentially a sort of first draft writing tool, as long as everything is treated as something that needs to be fact checked completely.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned that there was some internal departments that were like, as you're going through the workflow, that, for example, when the article was about to go live, a journalist editor might have seen the developer or engineering team added like the old text and stuff like that. So in that sort of process, is there a way that you guys that internally managing the ownership of the use of the tool for a particular step in the process, or how do you advise that other organizations can do that to avoid any sort of overlap in terms of the production workflow?
Yeah, and I think we're not a WordPress shop ourselves, but certainly love WordPress and know that it has a lot of tools that are currently under development too, and some that already exist and some that are coming, that are going to really help streamline production and make sure that all of your I's are dotted and T's are crossed before you hit a publish button. And I think AI is helping a lot. We have a tool in our CMS called Yellow Lights that is, for instance, telling it detects when we have written about somebody who's given us money, or a company or an individual, and we're required to disclose that as a nonprofit. So we it automatically puts a disclosure statement at the bottom of the story. And we'll do that for, that's similar with style checks. There's a few tools out there that are doing this already, but I think they're getting better and better, and it's just going to get more and more affordable to use those. And it's just going to, be table stakes for a good content management process to be utilizing those. I think, and similar to tools that are suggesting headlines or suggesting social copy and production resources like that.
Hey, did you have, before we shift gears, did you have any additional thoughts on this subject?
So our website, actually, mediacopilot.ai, which is separate from the Substack, we're a WordPress site. So we've kind of just scratched the surface of what we want to do, but we're definitely been looking at some of the plugins and tools that we can use to sort of really quickly turn certain tedious tasks into essentially like a drop down or a button. So we've looked at a few plugins, like there's AI to Social is a good one so far, and you can just sort of quickly get social media copy going. And I'm really looking forward to sort of exploring more of those kind of tools, because that's essentially what you want to do, right? Like AI is not meant in many applications to be talked to, though chatbots are useful, and 100% that archive tool is amazing. You think about the number of times I've wondered at a public, have we ever written about X, right? And you can searches are notoriously not great at sort of uncovering those things, and often people have left and you don't really know. But a lot of applications don't. You don't really necessarily want the chatting and the prompting, and frankly, like, not everyone's good at it. Just like not everyone's good at social or SEO copy. So a lot of people don't have patience for prompt engineering. So any tools that sort of both abstract the prompting away and put it right where you're working, I feel like that, is certainly a trend. But in journalism specifically, I think you're going to see more tools integrated into Slack, and Slack now has its own AI enabled functions, like being able to summarize long threads. Slack, as every publication knows, is a horrible archiving tool. You saw something in Slack and you can't find it, a half hour later because several people were typing. So what you need to do is sort of just have the tools right there, even though like that's where you're always working. So there's a great tool. A friend of mine, Ryan Restivo, over at RJI, he was a fellow. He built something called YesEO. Gives you headline suggestions right there, and likewise WordPress, the CMS, within the next 6 months to a year, I think it's going to be very common for a CMS to have generative features, essentially abstracted to drop downs and buttons in several places. Again, there's still going to be a lot of applications where you want to chat with and do some prompt iteration at least. But for a lot you don't, but you can still tap into the power of this tech, and that's really where it's going.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Pete. Let's shift gears to service journalism. So I'd love to talk more about how we can make some data sets and all that more accessible to make that potentially a product. But before we do that, Pete, why are journalists the best prompt engineers? You had a recent article, I believe, on your publication about this.
That's right. Yeah, actually, I had the privilege of talking to David Caswell, who's been working on AI in journalism since before any of us were, probably. Like back when AI was all about data lakes and turning earnings reports into content. But the reason journalists make great prompt engineers is because we are very curious people. And we are used to asking questions and then asking follow-up questions and getting at the heart of something. Particularly those who are good at interviewing. Because it's almost like you're interviewing ChatGPT, right? When you sit down and use it, you're like, well, tell me about this area that I don't know about as well. I'll tell you something. But what if we emphasize this and do that? And could you express that a little differently? And then if you keep going back and forth. So it's really just using those, what I think most journalists have, and sort of why they got in the profession, that sort of curiosity and need to know more and keep asking follow-ups is why they just tend to be good prompt engineers. And when I talked to David, he was a firm believer that as much as I was just talking about abstracting prompting away, he believes it's actually going to be part of a journalist's skill set going forward is to some extent prompt engineering. I also tend to believe that. I think two things are true at once. There's a lot of tools you don't need to prompt and you just need the tech, but there are a lot of tools you do and you want to, and that's where those will stay, and journalists will, I think, do very, very well with those tools.
Any thoughts on that, Liam?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think about, that it's going to be as fundamental as Google has been for research, for online research in particular, and in some ways the interface for it does line up with the way that journalists are asking questions. To your point, Pete. So I think that's right. I think it's something that we will not we're going to need and need to get better at. And I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I think it's also going to be good at kind of giving a starting point for answers to those questions. If you are seeing people commonly readers commonly asking a particular question, I'm not saying you should just say, hey, go to ChatGPT, reader, but yeah, if that's a place to start, or that's a place that a lot of readers are going to be starting, I think with questions that if they don't get a good answer, they're going to come to you. So that is going to be just in the information sphere for everybody, increasingly so. So when a reader comes to an audience team at a newsroom with a question, I think it's going to be a question that is they probably already asked Google. They maybe have already asked ChatGPT, and so it's going to be on the journalists to dig a level deeper. And maybe that is prompt engineering, just asking the same question and phrasing it a little better or more differently, or asking the right follow-ups to a knowledge repository to get that answer for the reader. So it is a form of translation that you're doing.
Appreciate that, Liam. Thanks for your input into that. Okay, so natural language generation has been something that's been around for a while. We've seen publications using common data, whether it's weather, whether it's sports recaps, to be able to produce summaries and articles, and essentially that's become a packaged product. We've got the year of the elections, where you want to keep up to date potential audiences around particular issues, awareness on particular candidates, or even other applications, right? So, Liam, I'm going to pass it over to you first. How can everyone here, or how can we start the direction of thinking about commonly available data that's not accessible to everyone, to make it accessible, and can that become a service or a product itself that organizations can use that can be their own?
Yeah, I think it depends on the outlet, of course, and what the strategy is. But I'll give an example from the Tribune that we're really experimenting with and see a lot of potential in, is working with the Texas government schools data. So we can get easily get a data set from a public records request of the thousands and thousands of Texas schools, and that's public schools, private schools. You get examples of what's the teacher salary, what's their median, what's their average tenure, what's the demographic breakdown of the students, questions like that. And so we have compiled that into a data explorer that you can go and Google any school in Texas, and hopefully we're the top result there. And so we're already doing that to a degree, but I think it gets a lot more interesting. That interface gets a lot more interesting if you're able to kind of converse with it and ask follow-up questions, to the point of, if you can go in and just get a list of data, but if you're really looking for first either a specific data point, or you're looking to query across a few schools to get an aggregate number, for instance, if you want to see all of the schools in the Dallas area, I don't think there's an easy answer for that right now in our Explorer product. Or if you want to, it can get really high level, and it gets a little more complicated if you want to have an input text box that says, like, where should I send my kid to school? Should I send them to a private school or a public school? And like, I don't think there's never going to be an easy answer, but you can give data that's formed by what you have received and what you've already cleaned up, and kind of helped to prepare for a reader to answer that, rather than them just going to the internet and asking the same question, where going to be a lot messier. So that's where I see a lot of potential, and it depends on the outlet and the data that you're working with. And if it's financial data or weather data, or there's all sorts of potential for services built on that sort of data set. And I'm excited about what we might see.
I'm going to quickly weave in before I could grab you into Pete, this part question. Are you looking at any particular WordPress chatbot tools? I want to get Emmanuel's question in as well. Any chatbots or any other tools that you're considering that can do that kind of interaction, that can then point people to particular sources? Are you looking at anything at the moment that is helping you to achieve this?
We're not looking at a specific tool yet. We are partnering with a local firm that startup that is kind of, again, querying our archives first to see whether a chatbot interface is even a good way to go look for information. And I don't know if I know of any chatbots on WordPress in particular, or chatbot interfaces on WordPress in particular. But I'm excited to do more research on this. I think anything that we set up would probably be more custom or sort of iframed into our site or CMS rather than something that's sort of built raw. I think that the way that it works, because there's such a level of interactivity to it, it's something that you can rely on a third-party service to, whether it's WordPress based or not.
I appreciate your transparency, Liam. Pete, how about yourself? What are your thoughts about this field and this aspect?
One of the things that, in terms of custom data sets and querying them, one of the things I find really mind-blowing lately in AI is these huge context windows we're talking about. So basically the amount of stuff you can actually put in the prompt itself and then ask the AI to analyze just right then and there, and sort of but it's been widely reported the Google Gemini Pro, I think, is 1.5. If you sort of do the super paid version, it's not just available on the web, but if you really go high end with it, you can get 1 million in the context window, which is crazy high. And the papers and research is looking at 2 million, 10 million context windows. That basically lets you fit anything from multiple volumes of a book. Maybe even at 10 million, you're probably getting to like the whole encyclopedia, if not more. Probably several sets of encyclopedias you can just put in the prompt, which is just mind-blowing to me. It's kind of like, wait a second, you mean you don't actually have to train or fine-tune or do RAG, retrieval augmented generation. You can just throw it all in, which is a great simplifying tool. And from an effective standpoint, at some point, probably fairly soon, we're going to effectively have an infinite context window. Just put whatever you want in that prompt and have it go to town. So what I think this sort of presents is, while it's great, like I love, all the stuff that Liam talked about, and that they've got teams to compile stuff and put data together and think about the way to sort of hook it into the AI. I think what these context windows are going to enable sooner, not later, is, more DIY, more democratization of that. And I think there's a real opportunity here. And I wouldn't mind your take on it, Liam, is for someone to come in with almost like a consumer level way of marking and compiling data to make it ready and compatible for a prompt. You know what I mean? That's sort of like me as an individual journalist. I think about that sometimes. It's like, how do I get, like, I know what I want from what the data I want. I don't actually have the data set, but if I spent some time gathering enough stuff, I would have it. But it's like, well, where do I put that? Is that in a Google folder, or is that in a Pocket thing? Or, I almost want the equivalent of a Pocket app to bookmark a bunch of things. And then here's the link, ChatGPT, go look at it, or whatever, your million context window thing is. It doesn't matter how big it is. It could be literally thousands of documents. Like, think about all the earnings reports for some ancient company like IBM or whatever, going all the way back. And I'm sure someone's got that compiled somewhere, but it's like, maybe something a little less obvious. Throw it all in addition to every other company. And then you got this super advanced financial analysis right at your fingertips without really needing to do a lot of the literal engineering.
Yeah.
I think that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, there's so much potential with that. I think it's already happening. I mean, the firm that we're partnering with here in Austin with our chatbot, there, you can connect it to Notion, you can connect it to a Google Drive folder, you can connect it to a variety of data sources, and it just starts going to town. I think the hard part, first of all, of course, is always going to be QA and making sure that it's still giving you the right data, and you can't. I mean, you don't have time to actually vet all this data to make sure that, because we're talking about 1 million documents. How do you know that that was an accurate source? So you got to make sure that it's able to do a little bit of pointing back to its source. So that's a really good tool for journalists. I think for end users, I think about what an end user really wants. What are the questions it really, that our audience wants answered, or that they have really big questions about. And I think that's another place where journalists and sort of news product experts have a big role to play, is in helping to prime users to be good askers of questions. So instead of just giving an open chat window, I really think we should be suggesting questions to ask. And that might just start juices flowing for an audience, for our audience, about like what else they could ask. So that's a great start. But even there, I think you can still, they'll always be able to go to Google and ask a general question. So what is the value add for a publisher in putting together a chatbot? It's really the quality and the sort of the user experience of like, you should know your audience well enough to know the kinds of questions that they're going to want to come to you for. And that's where those sort of really targeted prompts and a really good design, I think, is going to be so crucial. I think some of the first things that we're thinking about, if we're ever going to open up a chatbot, for instance, to our whole audience, would be really smart design. And beyond the engineering capacity, it's just like you have to be really good about giving insight to users, making sure it's not just an open field that they don't know what to do with.
I've seen and this is going to lead to a question as well. I've seen on Macworld, they're using smart AI search so that they actually have the site search function that's on typically WordPress websites, but it's literally the experience that you guys have in terms of being able to retrieve the archives from that. How do you see that different from a user experience on chatbots? Do you think that, what would be your advice? Would you be, depending on the use case, start off with smart search and improving that for better user experience on the website, or go to chatbot? Because I think that naturally people are thinking about going chatbot directly, because we are getting a lot more attuned to, or like we're getting used to that interface because of ChatGPT. But what do you guys see the balance or the use case for smart search versus chatbots, I guess?
Well, I guess I come at this from a media strategy standpoint, which is, like, how do I keep my person on the site as long as possible, as long as we're serving up sort of good content, right? And so you think about the pain points of search on a site, and which is never really as good as simply using a site operator in a Google window, probably until now. So, because now with chatbots, it's not quite search; it is a type of search, but it's more context and sort of getting, like, because you go to a search, the people who are searching, and there's a lot, in terms of like what people actually do on media websites. Like, search is one of the number one things they do. Is that they're kind of either looking for more context or on something that's like right in front of them is a good plan, and sometimes they're not really sure quite what they're looking for. And usually, like, whatever they've come to, they haven't like fully figured out like what the next thing is, and so they're searching for it. So I think the idea of a smart search is probably where I would start among the things you listed, just because it's, like you have the ability now with AI to sort of probe what they're even doing, and suggest things, and maybe even get them to sort of search with better questions or in a smarter way. I feel like when Microsoft Copilot does things well, it does this pretty well. I think that's still a bit of a work in progress for them, but that idea of like, I can, we haven't quite seen this with Google yet, except in their experimental stuff in terms of search. But the idea of this thing that's there to help and asking follow-up questions, but isn't quite as annoying as Clippy, I think is something that people can, media sites can definitely look at.
Yeah, I find that a fair number of our search results are people looking for a very specific content item, and I wouldn't want to stop them from going there right away. It's oftentimes it's just our website has a lot of stuff, and certainly its navigation could be improved, and they're saying, I want this one article, or I want this one product, or Explorer that you have, and I know you have it, and I read about it, or someone told me about it, just get me there. And so I think the smart search is best for that, and will be the best for that for a long time to come. That I think there's the use case for chatbot and just really advanced advanced search beyond that smart search. But I think that smart search can go a long way and will stay for a long time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for answering that. Let's shift gears one more time and then open up to Q&A. So any, Pete, Liam, your final thoughts on sort of the direction for the year ahead, what you guys are excited about, and what maybe, I know maybe you've alluded to already in some of the things that relating to the product and so forth. And also looking at one more aspect of that, what's the LLM that's going to rule them all, I guess? What's going to be the one that you think that publishers should be looking at, or maybe, I don't know, because everything with everyone's still default ChatGPT, but is that going to change or not?
Right.
And maybe I'll pass it over to Pete first as our watcher of the landscape.
Well, okay, so big picture, right? So the last decade changed what journalists do pretty profoundly in some ways. But one way I'll zero in on is for the 2010s, pretty much every person who worked in digital media, you needed to not just be a good journalist, a good reporter, or a good editor. You also needed to be a good content marketer to some extent, because these new things like search and social, well, these are ways we can get more eyeballs, but they give you more, certainly give you more gateways to that, but you have to write bespoke content for each of these platforms, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or SEO, meta headlines. And everyone needed to figure out how to do this. Some people were good at it. Some people liked it. I don't know who those people are, but they were awesome and I love them. And, but a large extent, it was considered and still is sort of Chrome around an article, right? There's kind of, you finish your article and then you do all these other things. But everyone had to do them. And we had to do sort of this thing where everyone was a content marketer. Well, now AI is starting to slowly but surely take over some of that. So we can kind of pull back a bit into sort of the core of what you're doing, which is the article. But the thing is, it's not a regression, it's a progression. Things are changing again. And rather than just going back to the words, now you have this whole thing called AI that's kind of helping you do the words in very real ways, everything from the research phase, again, to the distribution phase. So rather than being a content marketer, I actually feel journalists now more than ever need to kind of be product managers. You know, you got to know what, how a chatbot works, why it works the way it works. What are the tools you can use, like get to know what Zapier is, which I'm still stunned how many reporters, journalists don't know what these sort of automation systems are. If you don't know Zapier, I mean, call me, or Liam, but it's a good automation system that can complement a lot of process you're doing in AI. And again, it's very democratic. Anyone can use it and you can start automating things. So I think going forward, sort of big picture wise, like I think if there's a takeaway to take is like, don't be afraid of the nuts and bolts of this, because the nuts and bolts are now more important than ever. And I really think beyond just journalists getting more product savvy, I think this is going to alter the relationship at organizations, whether it's the Texas Tribune or the New York Times or whatever, between content and product engineering, because the distribution systems are soon going to, we were just talking about search, but it's even beyond that. What AI sort of can unlock is, altering content almost at the story level and giving sort of different versions of articles if you want to build that as a feature. There are ways to basically present and distribute content that we're really just scratching the surface of. And I fully expect within 5 years of sort of an AI mediated ecosystem, what people actually get from media sites and news sites is going to be much more malleable. And that's going to require a new level of cooperation between content and the product side of it.
Yeah, I would agree with all that, all of it. And I think, especially thinking about, like, we're testing out text-to-speech tools, for instance. And if you're in your car, you should be able to get an audio version. If you have 3 minutes versus 10 minutes, you should be able to get a version of your story that is that variation. I'd also say, we're thinking a lot about how, as a brand, we need to highlight voice and trust and expertise. I think that it's not just that there's a proliferation of misinformation that's just getting easier and easier to make. I think there's also just we need to be bragging about ourselves, our reporters, all the things they're really good at, the knowledge they have, the language that they can speak, whatever it is. I think those are not only good signals for search and for linking and expertise. I just think that voice is gonna be really crucial. That's the one thing that I see in the LLMs right now that is missing, that we cannot adopt at scale right now, ChatGPT or anything like that, because it's just got the wrong tone. And that's gonna get easier. It will start to get the right tone, or one of these LLMs or a few of them or all of them will at some point figure out how to take a certain author's voice and co-opt it a little bit, or make it, mimic it. So that's coming, but I don't think it'll ever replace the need for a voice and for an author to be able to project expertise and have that expertise, and for us to highlight that on our site and across all of our products and say, like, you're talking to a human right now. That is extremely important. So I do think there's a lot of value in the tools that we're talking about, and it's all going to be very, very crucial. But I also think just highlighting that we are a news organization powered by humans is going to be the most important thing we do in the next few years too.
Sorry, I just remembered you asked about the one LLM to rule them all, which was well, I'll give a cheat answer if you don't mind, because it's not going to be any one. The thing is, what I think another thing that is going to essentially become more and more apparent this year is while some LLMs will be more performant than others, that's true, both generally and from a statistical standpoint. What's very clear is you don't often need all that power. You will find many applications where speed and just getting sort of a generative result as quickly as possible is the thing you want. And you'll also sort of get a feel for, the fine tuning and the safety features of each one. So, for example, Claude, I think, is not quite as powerful as GPT-4, at least is generally thought to be that way. But I find it better at some specific tasks, like, for example, summarization. I do think Claude does a better, and sentiment analysis. I think it does a better job at that sort of thing. So what I think you're basically going to just have a multi-platform LLM world where you're going to gravitate to these really performant models for certain applications, certainly a lot of public-facing stuff, but for a lot of stuff internally and things where you just want speed, you're going to go to something open source or some alternative. So the tools that can do that, I happen to use a tool. It's called Mind Studio. It's definitely worth checking out because it's a very interesting and useful no-code platform for building AI apps. It allows for different LLMs at every stage of your workflow, which I think is extremely powerful. So, like, even though I think the OpenAI platform that they've built and the GPTs that they've done is interesting, it's going to be always limited by the fact all you can use is OpenAI's models. And sometimes I'm going to want to use Llama. Sometimes I'm going to want to use Claude. Sometimes I'm going to use something else, So it's never going to be an all one size fits all solution in the future. It's going to be multipolar. That's the word I was grasping for.
Yeah, I was you stole my answer, which is the same thing. It's different use cases. They're good for different LLMs are good for different use cases. I don't think that's going to change. And I think one nice thing I've seen in the tools that I've played with, similar to I have to check out Mind Studio, but is that it's not hard in general to swap between these for a lot of these platforms that are being built. That they can adopt. They just need 4 different API keys. And that's 4 different services that they can use for these different jobs. Sometimes they show that to the user. You can pick which one it is. Sometimes behind the scenes, they'll decide this one's the best, this LLM is the best tool for the question you're asking or the job you want to do. So I don't think there will be one LLM to rule them all either.
Perfect. I would thank you, Pete. Thank you, Liam. Awesome discussion in chat. Let's shift and see if there's any other questions from our attendees. So please feel free to leave any questions in the chat. Let's feel free to leave any questions for the chat. Any tools? We had My Tools, which was a nice nugget that we got in the last second. Maybe there's a few more that you guys can ask Pete and Liam, or any other use cases that are happening, whether it's within WordPress or just in general?
Oh, specific tools? Let me think. Depends on what we're doing. See, it's funny. We consult with journalists, media companies, sorry, marketing companies, and also PR firms. And we've had a bunch of PR firms lately, and a lot of them want to do presentations. And I feel that I've only dabbled with Microsoft Copilot, so it might be much better at this, but there's an online app called Beautiful.ai that does pretty decent auto generation of presentations. Actually, I'm kind of researching right now. I'd be curious if anyone in the crowd even has good stuff, but that's the best one I've found so far in terms of a good mix of being able to do something from scratch quickly and for relatively low cost.
One tool that I would look into for WordPress, I know they have a pretty good WordPress integration, is Noda. They have a custom LLM that they're building for journalists, and they're very, very specifically saying they're not going to do an off-the-shelf tool because that could change its price or change its model at any time. It's promising. It's like they're doing a lot of interesting work on so in the basics, like suggesting headlines and social copy, but also generating videos, for instance, for social media. And yeah, I think they're just getting started, seeing a lot of the work they're doing. They're hiring fast. I think that's going to be an interesting one to keep following for publishers.
Thanks.
Liam, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you saw the chat, I guess, so you can answer.
Yeah, our partner in Austin, they're a small startup in Austin called Attri, A-T-T-R-I, Attri.ai. And we're basically piloting this with them. They're in absolute seed stage demo mode, which means that we're partners in a, they're giving us their services free of charge, basically, so that we can be a proof of concept for them. So that's been a really nice way to kind of get off the ground, because we're a nonprofit with not a huge budget to be able to put towards these experiments. They've been a really good partner to get underway with.
Perfect. And with that, thank you everyone for joining. Please, we have our tomorrow's session on WordPress performance and editorial workflows with Aslam, Gabriel, and Barry Pollard. So do come and join us for the next day. But once again, Pete, Liam, thank you so much for your insights, for the dynamic discussion, and to jump in. And for everyone, until next time, see you later and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.